hits for the bench. Extra attacker coming on to even things up. To the net, Albertson scores!
The Extra Attackers Podcast with Maude and Jordan.
Hey everyone, Maude here for Extra Attackers. The NHL 24 reveal trailer has dropped today, and I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of a live reaction to it. I haven't watched it at all yet. I don't know what any of the new features are yet. I haven't even gone on Twitter yet today to see people talking about it, so completely fresh reaction here. And also, my co-host Jordan will be joining me later for a full discussion about the reveal. Should be lots to talk about with that, depending on what they may or may not show in this trailer. But yeah, for a little bit of background, I've been playing these NHL games ever since I was a kid. Way back with NHL 06 was my very first one, and then I think it was NHL 12 was when I really started buying them every year. And I kind of did that, like literally every year up until about I think NHL 21. I think 21 and 22. And also 23, I didn't purchase. I just kind of streamed them on the EA Play subscription service kind of towards the end of the year when they would get added on there. Just play a little bit of franchise mode, but because I found the game has been kind of stale in the last few years. So this year, since it's been a couple years since I've actually bought the game at launch, I'm excited to see what they might be changing, what they might be adding that's new. I'm hoping for something new and something fresh. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump right into this trailer here and see what they've got going on.
From non-stop pressure and physicality to dynamic new ways to attack.
New ways to attack. Oh my god.
And so much more. We couldn't be more excited to show you what's new this
Very
year.
cinematic so far. Lots of close-up shots, angles that you will never see when you're actually playing the game.
Crossplay is here.
Crossplay, of course.
You can finally compete with or against your friends on same
It's kind of funny how they talk about crossplay is here when they at least had some crossplay last year. Like it's not it's expanded. It's better now, but it's not something that I'm like super excited for. Exhaust engine, okay. Better hitting, I guess. I don't even know.
Exhaust engine is made up of the sustained pressure system.
Sustained pressure. Okay, so fatigue for the goalies, and maybe it will apply to the players too.
Offensive events such as shooting, passing, and checking in the attacking zone, as you can see with the pressure gauge.
Oh, we've got a gauge on the ice. What the hell? Boost in stats if you've got a lot of pressure. Oh my. Oh, that's gonna be interesting. That's probably gonna make it a lot more tilted towards offense if you. Oh my god.
Peppering the goalie from all angles to tire them out are now effective and cause authentic goal scrambles.
Okay, I like that kind of peppering the goalie and forcing him to make a bunch of saves might be actually more effective for once, because that really wasn't a thing in the past games. That'll be interesting, but I do wonder if this might be a little bit overpowered. This is going to be interesting. It's such a feature that they even have the actual graphic for the pressure system on the ice while you're in the zone at all times. So that's definitely something new. They've never had anything like that. That's such a dynamic feature that you can actually see the meter, going up while you're playing. Like anything sort of fatigue or pressure related that we thought maybe was in the game before, it was just kind of all behind the scenes and we didn't really know how it worked. So it's interesting that they're expanding upon it here, and you can actually see, I wonder if it'll be like, okay, if I just cycle the puck around and make like a bunch of passes or just throw it on net and get a bunch of rebounds over and over, you can kind of just work the pressure meter up. Hopefully you can't game the system too much with that, but let's see what else they got.
And cycling the puck to build sustained pressure opens up new opportunities.
Yeah, lots of cycling. That's good. I like that.
Making the safe boards and outplay, or risk turning the puck over in the slot.
Yeah, it should be harder to pass it out of the zone. That's one thing that's a little bit too easy in the current games, so I think I like that. Goalie animations, we love seeing that. The desperation saves are sometimes a little bit goofy in these games. Hopefully these aren't too over the top. Oh, that one was ridiculous. Wow.
Take the body, take the game.
All right, more checking.
Physics-based contact feature revolutionizes checking,
Is this like a totally new physics engine? Oh my god, we've never seen a hip check like that before.
stepping up the fun and authenticity of defense.
Okay.
Now, if you land
I guess those are new animations? It's hard to tell.
enter the play slower.
Okay, slower for players to get up after getting hit. That's really good. I'm glad about that. Oh, whiffing on hits too. Extra animations for that. That's interesting. Oh, so it's going to be a lot more risky to try to throw the body at the blue line. Oh, wow.
Based reactions, creating tons of new
Okay, lots of animations here that look pretty new.
right stick will allow you to shove the opponent, creating
Okay, small hits with a quick little shove instead of holding down the button. Okay.
new gameplay meta that adds a dedicated reverse body check control.
Oh, reverse hit. Oh, that's good. That's a good addition. I wonder how that'll be interesting to have that balance, because you don't want to just have people be able to reverse hit endlessly. So hopefully it's best with like the strongest players, you know, like they're good at doing it, but you can't be like reverse hitting people with like Johnny Gaudreau and stuff. Button map moves. Oh wait, hold on. I'm gonna run it back here. Is that like, are these like deeks that are not with the skill stick and it's just the buttons? Let's see. Oh, and I didn't even notice this. I'm sure everyone else watching already noticed, but they have the players actually have stamina meters below them on the ice now too. That used to be. Didn't they have that in the really old games, like in the GameCube days and the PlayStation 2 days? Like, oh, that's interesting. So you can actually, so instead of, you would only be able to see your lines fatigue when you would be changing the lines. But now you can see it per each individual player. That's actually pretty cool. So if one guy is hustling like crazy, you'll be able to see the effect of that, I assume. At least I assume that's what how these green bars are going to work down here. Like these guys have full energy right now.
Pass. Showing off your skill has never been this fun. Total control skill moves.
All right, new skill moves, or at least a new control setup. So it looks like the same deeks, but yeah, button mapped. So I wonder how that's going to control. So are these going to be easier to pull off than the skill stick?
Controls, you'll still have that option. Plus, a new ability to fake, pass, or deke out of every move. Also add
Okay, you can fake any move. That's cool. That's a new dynamic. I like that. Passing is improved.
at your fingertips. Quicker direct passes to keep puck possession and mount that all-important pressure.
Passing is something that I feel like has always been kind of sketchy in the games lately. Oh, that's sick that you can do that. Ooh.
Set up the perfect play. This also unlocks stretch passes, giving you new ways to attack the net. But hitting the
It's hard to watch the gameplay of the passing and actually tell what's different. I feel like you have to control it to feel the difference. Like, I'm looking at these passes and I'm just like, yeah, I could do those before. I don't know.
move the puck around the ice by tapping.
Oh, even faster. First touch passes, even faster now.
So many more exciting passing opportunities and ways for players to
It's like a slap pass almost right there.
for our brick
Okay.
there. An update to our human goal
More goalies. Okay, human goalies. That's good.
and intuitive.
Those have always been kind of questionable on the recent games.
Trading empty net goals and a
Yeah, it's the goalies slide way too much, moving way too much.
have added a new tethered control system.
Tethered.
As you slide back and forth to make saves,
Let's see this. What do they do?
release the left analog stick, and your goalie will auto-return back to a centered position.
Okay, he kind of snaps back to the middle instead of losing the net. Okay.
To guess the location of the shot for a bonus on your save attempt,
Oh.
increases the chance of a goal.
Oh, that's interesting.
And really breathe
That gives them a little bit more control than just hoping you're in position and that your goalie doesn't whiff. If you can actually choose if the shot's going high or low and try to predict that. All right, so that's the whole trailer right there. Pretty cool stuff, I have to say. It's not like a complete overhaul in terms of the gameplay, but it's a lot of things that I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like the reverse hitting and fake out deeks. You can fake out any deek whatsoever. Like passing and goalies, tons of new things, and apparently the hitting is different. There's definitely some new hits in there. So this is gonna be interesting. I was hoping to see some franchise mode stuff, because I'm a big franchise mode player, or even like Be a Pro, because Be a Pro has been stale for a couple years now. But the title does say it was a gameplay trailer, so I'm not surprised that they didn't get into too much of that. But I hope they have another trailer soon for the other game modes, even for like Hut. Like, I haven't played Hut in a few years, but if they I don't know, if they do some interesting stuff with Hut, I might jump back in, especially if it's less microtransaction focused than it usually is, although that's probably going to be very unlikely with the way these games are. You can already see they're advertising the the NHL points. You got to pre-order right now and get the digital cash and get those free packs. Get a Cale Makar player item if you pre-order. So I think that was a pretty cool trailer. I think those are some interesting enough changes for the gameplay where I'm actually intrigued to, try the game out like pretty quickly this year, as opposed to the previous couple years when they revealed it. I'm like, that just kind of sounds like the same thing. It doesn't sound like it's going to change very much, but these are some pretty cool additions, at least in theory. With EA Sports, it's always about the features sound cool, but will they be implemented properly? So I don't know. I'm pretty excited after that trailer, but let's see what Jordan thinks. I'm gonna bring him in here in a little bit, and we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion, a little bit about more of the trailer, and then also about what we want to see in the other game modes in NHL 24, or any other features that we've been hoping to be added for a while now. So, Jordan, you have also seen the NHL 24 reveal. What did you think?
I actually thought it was pretty good overall. I like the new gameplay changes. I'm disappointed I couldn't react with you in person. I was unfortunately stuck at work. But fortunately, what I saw, I liked. To begin with the new zone features, I honestly think that's a fantastic idea. I feel like before, in all the NHL games, they really incentivize scoring off the rush. Through cross creases or even quick plays where you can move into the slot and get a snipe off. And there wasn't really any reason to be creative with your passing plays or anything like that before. It wasn't that incentivized. And now it's kind of incentivized. You want to be able to sustain pressure, and that's a viable strategy. Whereas cycling before, like if you couldn't break into any space, it just never was viable. There was no reason ever to do it. And it also really heightened play styles where you had really fast players that could break on rushes very quickly. And that's a little bit more mitigated now. There's two different ways to kind of force chances, which I think is a really good change, if I'm being honest. But what did you think?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with most of that. It seems like it's going to be a pretty big shake up to the meta of the game, really, and how goals are scored, especially with the whole fatigue system. Like you mentioned in the past, really fast players being kind of the meta. Now they might get tired quicker. If you get one fast break, or if you're just purely trying to rely on fast breaks, maybe after defending in the D zone for a long time, maybe your player's going to be too tired to be able to counterattack. It could be switching up how people play.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think that in conjunction with the goalie fatigue system, like adds some really interesting levels of play. Like before, you would lose games having like 30 shots where you would score twice, the other person would score 3 times on 10 shots. I'm feeling if you're like absolutely badgering someone, especially with the goalie fatigue system, you're going to be scoring more goals. You're going to be winning more games. And it's going to remove less of that like classic EA like ice tilt feeling where you absolutely dominate someone and nothing really comes of it just because you got unlucky or the other player's goalie was just insane out of nowhere. I feel like these new systems really counteract that, which is really smart if it's utilized effectively. But I thought it was a really good idea to change up the meta, like you said.
Yeah, I was going to mention Ice Tilt as well, because that phenomena has been so prevalent in the NHL series that as far back as I can remember, as soon as they added online multiplayer, people complain about outshooting their opponent like crazy and still losing the game. It felt like there was a little bit of like rubber banding in there, but even if they didn't program it that way on purpose, maybe it's just that there wasn't enough of a feature kind of like this fatigue system where actually dominating someone can actually work out in your favor.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to kind of just balance out the playing field for players that might not necessarily have like 30 crazy deeks to get in on goal, or a player who doesn't just want to go and score the glitch goal in that year's game. It allows for a more realistic sim, which I think is what a lot of people wanted. And honestly, I've got a surprise because I didn't really think this sort of system would ever exist. I never even thought of it myself. So it's really weird to see like something unique that's good from that come from EA, when realistically it's something unique that just makes the game worse. So I'm like pleasantly surprised, tentatively surprised, but pleasantly surprised in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like a lot of times across all of their sports games, EA will always manage to come up with a good idea, and then the way that it gets implemented ends up being questionable. So the idea of this one sounds great, and I like it in theory, as we've said. I just hope that they can get it right.
Same here, and that's been the big problem in past games. But I've heard that there's like a new head of development behind this game. The
That's
community
true.
managers are apparently doing a lot better job at discussing with like different influencers in the NHL scene and things like that. A lot of influencers that actually came out of the media weekend with EA were reporting that it was actually significant positive change, which is really rare to see from that weekend. So that gives me a little bit of hope. But to continue on with the new features, we of course have the new passing system. Um, I think that system is fantastic as well because even though I liked aiming passes, particularly with like holding right trigger and aiming with your left stick before, I found it was absurdly clunky, often would not work, would not go to the player you wanted, even last year when they advertised improved passing as a new feature. And quick passing plays weren't really possible. It was really hard to do it consistently. But I feel like with new button prompts, like they're showing in the offensive zone and with players up ice, it's way easier to actually hit the target you intend. And also with the color button prompts above players' heads, it's also easier to notice players around the ice. And I feel like that'll make cycling easier, which again, with the new fatigue system, will be a big part of the game when cycling has never been part of the game before, which I think is huge because it's like a huge thing in hockey.
I have to say, during my reaction, I didn't like fully absorb what was going on when they were talking about the passing. Like I understood the quick passing update and stuff, but in terms of like the aiming and stuff, can you give me like a quick rundown on how exactly it's gonna work?
Yeah, so like I don't know this for sure, but I assume based on what I saw that instead of you actually aiming with the like holding down right trigger, aiming with the left stick, and it kind of shows you where your pass is going to line up. It's just simple. You see a player up ice that has a Y button over their head. You press Y, your player will attempt to pass
Oh,
there.
that's totally
It's
different.
it's completely different. It's influenced by things like your player's skill, based on what they said in the trailer. Influenced on your player's skill, also influenced on in-game mechanics, such as if you have an opposing player in that sight line, they're going to try to intercept it, and based off their stats, that determines whether or not they intercept it. But I found things like stretch passes were incredibly difficult in NHL 23. In the
They would
last
miss
couple
a
games, they're
lot.
exactly. Whereas you see them so often in real life, and especially players that are capable of hitting them, they're make for great moments. So I don't like. I'm still unsure how it's going to feel with just a button press instead of manually aiming. But I'm intrigued because I think it's overall like a more positive move to something that can generate more realistic moments like stretch passes and things like that.
And previously with the passing, they also had the aspect where the longer you held down the trigger for passing, it was how fast or hard the pass would be. I wonder if that's going to carry open to the button mapped version as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if the longer you hold down the button will change the power, or if they have an entirely new system for that, or like they didn't actually. I don't think they actually explicitly talked about it that much in the trailer. So for all I know, it could be a very different system. Maybe the old passing is still there, but this is just an additional option if you want to be more confident in a
Yeah,
pass you're trying to
could be.
make. I could that could be the actual case. I don't actually know, but I do think that like what they did definitely show the quick passing looks really interesting, and I'm excited to see how that works.
Anything else in the trailer that you liked or didn't like?
Well, I thought that the reverse hitting, I know you mentioned that in the reaction, but the reverse hitting is a good idea because when they advertised the new hitting mechanics, my brain immediately went to, are we going to have it that whenever you get hit, you lose the puck? Like,
Yeah.
one huge problem I had with prior games is that player strength felt like it was almost zero for every player except big power forwards. And in real life, you'll see like puck battles are super quick, like players hitting sticks off their own stick or quickly shoving other players out of the way. It's hard to take the puck off of good players in the NHL. That wasn't really shown in the NHL games. If you got bumped, your player would stumble, you lose the puck right away. It was super frustrating to deal with, and it made the game feel way more chaotic than it should be based on what you see in real life. So when they showed the new hitting system with the shoving, with the big body checks, I thought, oh shit, like we're just going to come into the zone, get pushed. That's going to be the meta. You go back and forth. But if you're able to protect in such a way with a reverse hit, even if you don't hit the opponent, I'm wondering if it allows you to kind of push off of them so you can anticipate checks. And I think that balances out the system. So if it works as intended and isn't just reserved for the league's best power forwards, I think it will hopefully balance out the meta and not create like a huge skew towards just hitting based gameplay.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be all about the balancing with that. But I like that they're trying something new with the physicality. Because, like, in the previous games, I found, especially when I would play against the computer, I just spam hitting all the time. Like, anytime the AI is entering the zone, I just destroy them every single time. And it doesn't matter what defenseman I'm using. It doesn't matter what forward they're using in terms of, like, size and weight. It was just... It was a little bit silly. So the fact that they are at least trying to put more depth into the physicality, I really like that.
I think so too. It's never really been there before. And it kind of reminds me actually when they added the new hitting physics in NHL 14, and that was a really nice welcome change because it made the gameplay more realistic. Granted, it's been a decade, which is a little bit long to wait, but I'm intrigued to see how this new system works to complement the rest of the game. And I think it's just really smart. But honestly, like I think that's it for most of the new hitting stuff. Moving on to of course, the new deking system, which, from what I understand, is using button prompts instead of using the right stick. In theory, I do like this because I think it will bring more consistent deking to the game. It was really hard in a moment's notice, unless you were literally a pro player, to execute some dekes off the rush, except for the most basic of dekes, such as a toe drag, a windmill, things like that. So I think this system might be able to allow players, especially at newer players, to pick up dekes and have fun exploring them right off the bat instead of having this pretty dramatic learning curve and remembering what button prompts or what right stick movements create which deke, what point at the clock with the right stick you had to be at to actually execute a deke, which was hella hard to remember. I think it actually incentivizes learning the system a bit. I'm a little bit concerned that'll be a little bit too easy, but I'm guessing that's based off of player skill level, and I'm pretty sure they'll have balances for that. But that's my only concern. But I'm intrigued. But what did you think, Maude?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, I think there's still going to be some skill stick dekes, and then it's also certain dekes were moved to the button mapping, which should be interesting because, like you said, trying to remember all of the skill stick combinations and stuff just became a little bit overwhelming for me over time. Like back in the day when they first added the skill stick, it was awesome, but they made it so complex that at a certain point I was like, I can't be bothered to learn all of the dekes or even remember them. Like I just lost the muscle memory at a certain point where it's like, I feel like it shouldn't be as hard as it is to do the through the legs deke, and in the trailer that was one of the ones that they showed as being button mapped. So I like that. It'll be a little easier for certain moves that you see like actually semi-frequently in the NHL that were maybe just a little bit too hard to pull off.
Exactly. I think like in that way, it's a great addition. Just makes the game more fun, gives you more options, maybe adds a little bit of realism based off what you can do, what was harder before. Things like that. So I think that was a very positive change, and I'm intrigued to see where it goes.
Mm-hmm. And from there, I think we want to talk a little bit about the other game modes in NHL that weren't talked about in this trailer because it was just the gameplay trailer. I know I used to play a lot of NHL online, so maybe I'll go back to doing that a little more this year since it seems like they've spiced up the gameplay a bit. If it does end up being good, I think I will be playing the online game modes a little bit more. But in the past few years, I've become more of an offline game mode person just because I find the online play was a little stale over the last few years. And growing up as well, it's harder to have time to play with your friends all the time, you know? And
Exactly.
So I became more of a single player person, and you and me both play a lot of franchise mode. So I think we want to start there. They always have like at least a couple new things for franchise mode every year, but sometimes it feels very minimal. And I think it's been like basically the same for the last few years now. If you had to say one thing that would be like the perfect change for you for them to make for franchise mode, what would it be?
Honestly, for me, it's ultimate player control. Literally allow the player to do anything they want in franchise mode. Allow them to change players' numbers, attributes, names, anything you want. Allow options like force trade, force a contract, force win, force lose. Add those options because I never understood why you would want to discourage like cheating in an offline game mode. And especially like I know the Madden series is not in a good place and the franchise mode is broken as hell. But since they have full control of the game mode, you're allowed to do certain things that you cannot do in NHL, and you can create your own challenges. And that's almost virtually impossible in NHL. Like, what if you want to create a team where, like, every time your center has a 30-goal season, you give him an attribute boost, right? Or something like your goalie has a really good season. Maybe he doesn't grow like you would expect him to. Like he maybe has like full elite potential, or I should say medium elite potential, and he has a really good season. He grows like 1 overall point. Why can't you change that? Why can't you make it more realistic? What if you have a player who's 90 overall but has like 3-star shooting, scores 10 goals, but gets like 60, 70 assists, and then demands like a $14 million contract? Real life, you would never sign him to that. Then what you can do is you could maybe force a contract that's reasonable, and you could also update his shooting so that maybe it's more in line with what he should actually be doing, because you never see that in the NHL, like a 10-goal player. And that happens in NHL with really good playmakers. And also, like I was saying with contracts, if you have a player that has a like really awful year, but just because they're high rated, they're asking for a bunch of money, then you could force a lower contract. If, for example, you have a trade in real life that happens, why can't you just edit the rosters in the middle of your franchise mode so that it's reflective of real life, so you don't have to completely start over or hope to God that the trade system actually reflects what happened in real life, because often it doesn't. So for me, the biggest thing is just give the player the ability to edit anything and everything, because then you can fix things that they just refuse to fix, right? Like it'll make the game more fun, more fluid, and it'll allow different, even party sort of ideas that could be implemented. For me, that's the biggest thing. But I want to hear what you think, Mon.
I'm glad that that's what you decided to talk about, because a lot of my problems with franchise mode are the things that the player can't control, like things that the AI teams do, and things regarding player development and stuff. Like you were saying, when you have a prospect that puts up a lot of points but he only gets like +1 overall growth. Like I was playing GM mode the other day. I had a prospect in the AHL who was like a low elite. He was like 67 rated, so he was kind of low rated. I played him on the second line in the AHL and he got like 60 points, which was surprisingly good. And then the next year he only gets like a +2 and he's 69 rated. It's like this guy just put up like top production for an AHL player and gets no growth at all. So it's things like that where if you just had more control and you could maybe even that sort of thing could be a setting where it's like player boosts based off of production. You could make it so that it's a little more effective or stuff like that. But also being able to force trades and like signings for the AI teams, I think would be really nice, because it would be an easy solution for EA too, because they wouldn't have to actually update how their AI acts in terms of making them make smart decisions, and you could just leave it in the hands of the player, where the player can just be like, okay, they should obviously do this, so I'm gonna make them do this, right? You have a lot of situations where the teams don't know how to clear cap space for their upcoming contracts that need to be signed, so they'll have like Austin Matthews will be going to UFA and he needs a raise, and Toronto will just sign sign a bunch of depth players for like $3 million and then they don't have enough cap space to give Matthews what he wants, like stuff like that. Or I've seen Andre Miller and Braden Point in a previous game when he was going to become an RFA. They will just sit out the entire season because the AI team doesn't know how to create enough cap room to actually be able to sign them. So if I could just go in and just be like, okay, New York Rangers, just dump Barclay Goodrow to another team that wants him so that you can sign Andre Miller. The AI will never do that. They don't know how to do that. So if EA doesn't want to spend the time developing to actually make the AI team smarter, just give us more control like that.
Honestly, yeah, I think like especially forced trade is a big thing, just to give you more control, because some of the stuff the AI does is so stupid. Like you were saying with the RFAs, the fact that it can happen every single year and it can happen for multiple years with some players is ridiculous, because it would never happen in real life. So if they're not going to put the time and effort into actually making the AI smarter, that's a really good option, a really good fix. The only other thing I might say is I think they should maybe tweak coaching.
Yeah.
I've never been like, I think the X Factor additions are really smart, but I do think there's problems with the X Factors in that you rarely, unless you very, very specifically draft and develop, find third line and fourth line players that will have X Factors. It's super rare. So it's really hard to get really good bottom six or penalty kill lines. So I think that's a little bit of an error in how they judge it. I just think that coaches need to be able to have systems that players can learn.
Yes.
I think it's ridiculous that you could draft someone that has no X Factors. They could grow to like 86. Maybe they're good on your second line. And even though you drafted and developed them, they're never going to properly work on that second line just because the coach doesn't like how they play. I understand that in real life, there's definitely like certain players that will favor certain different maneuvers. But if a coach is teaching you a system, a lot of players play to that system. There are going to be small differences, of course, but they're going to, if you have a good coach, they're going to fully buy into that system. That should enhance bottom six depth. It should enhance penalty killing. And the fact that that's so hard to achieve right now is honestly really annoying. And I know that you can edit X Factors onto players into the new franchise mode, but it feels kind of goofy that you have to do that. Just to get a respectable bottom six. And at times, even players who are good but don't have X Factors, to get them to work in the top six, you have to do that. So that would be the other thing. I think if you have a player on your team for long enough, or you draft and develop a player, they should be fairly consistent with the system your coach is presenting. Of course, if you like hire a new coach or something, maybe it takes a year or two for the system to be fully integrated. There's like a little bit of a transition period. Totally fine, because I think that just adds to the realism. But the way that it is right now, it feels more gimmicky and based off of if you get lucky with having all X-factored players in your top six.
Exactly. The coaching is too rigid. It's too luck-based in terms of just when you start up your save file, it gives you a random coach and it randomizes the players' line strategies. So you could start with the best teams in the league. You can start a GM mode with Colorado, Vegas, and it will just give you a coach that hates all of your players. He hates McKinnon. And it's like, why is this a thing? You would think that they would at least have default coaches for each team that kind of makes sense for their play style as well. Like, for example, the New York Islanders, they're a defensive team that makes the playoffs because of their defense, but then they suck ass in the simulation because their coach doesn't make them play like that, and you can't really build a defensive team that sims well like that. It just doesn't make any sense. And in terms of the player line fits as well, you're 100% right, because you can draft Connor Bedard and then have your coach fucking hate him, and you have to fire your coach because he hates Connor Bedard or like Connor McDavid or something, and you have to get rid of the coach and get a new coach. Whereas in real life, any coach, no matter what system he plays, he will find a way to fit the best prospect in the world onto his team.
Exactly. And it would create ridiculous situations where your coach would have like a 60-win season and then he just doesn't like your players. So you're like, okay, I guess I have to fire him anyway. Or you'll have a bad team, like you'll be starting a rebuild that has like a better than expected season. Maybe they get like 40 wins. Maybe they're just slightly above 500. But because your coach doesn't like the players you currently have or the prospects who are coming up, you would fire them anyway.
Yep.
Which, I mean, just breaks the realism sim. And for some players, that's absolutely what they're going to go for. And I know I talked before about how you should allow more player agency and like being able to force different things. But some players aren't going to want to do that. Some players are just going to want the inherent system to be good. And the game just doesn't work very well with the systems that are in place right now. And I think coaching is overall a good thing because it adds more dynamics to the game. It means that you actually have to scout players, which before didn't really mean anything. And I do think that like Fog of War is like I never use it. I don't like it as a system, but it even makes you scout without Fog of War, which makes it more interesting to play. And you don't just have to scout for like morale, like the morale system, which I also don't use.
That sucks too.
So it sucks too. So I think it just adds like a new it adds a new layer, and it makes it more fun to play even when you're not using those systems. So I think it's up to EA to kind of adjust the coaching system, make it more realistic. That's the only thing that people are really asking for. And honestly, considering the fact that they didn't really change that much last year, they added the custom leagues, which I will probably never use. It seemed like more of a gimmicky feature than anything. I really hope they put more of a focus on the small intricacies as in the game mode, because I do think the overall framework isn't bad. I think it just needs some tweaking with the things we've discussed.
Exactly. Instead of adding like extra stuff like they did last year with the custom teams, we need those small changes that will change the meta, just like what they've done with the gameplay for this year's game. And like, one more thing on the line chemistry too, it bugs me that you can have 3 players who, for example, fit perfectly on, say, your coach's third line strategy, but they're all your first liners, right? Or they're the guys that you want on your second line. So why can't the coach just, because he knows that these 3 players work perfectly together with this strategy that he likes, but you can't just have him use that strategy on the second line instead of the third, because they're better players who should play the second line, right? It's stuff like that where it's just too rigid and they need to give you flexibility. That's all I'm asking for, really, is the flexibility.
Yeah, exactly. It should be there in any avenue you search for. And my last point regarding line chemistry is that it's so annoying when you have two-way forwards on in your bottom 6 and your coach hates them on the penalty kill, or you'll have defensive defensemen who your coach hates on the penalty kill. In real life, I'm sorry, like even if like you don't exactly like the exact system orient that your defensive defenseman plays, you're going to like him on the penalty kill because that's their specialty. Like, why is that not highlighted more in game?
Yep.
But I mean, like the be all and end all of it is that it should just be a system that gives players more control. It should reflect reality more. And all we're asking for is small changes. We don't really want like huge new sweeping things because there isn't really that much to ask for in that regard. It's just small intricate changes to make the game flow better and more fun. And I think they have hopefully an opportunity to do it here. I hope that the franchise mode deep dive is like 20 minutes like it has been in past years, to go through all the little changes instead of here's just the trailer where we show custom leagues. I'm curious to see how that'll end up, but I'm intrigued. The new gameplay changes have me intrigued that something interesting is on the horizon, hopefully.
I will say one last thing that I also would like them to add to franchise mode is why don't they have the injured reserve? Why is that not a thing? Like
that is really weird.
I feel like that would be very easy for them to implement, and it's constantly used in real life. And then you get situations where the player is on injured reserve for like multiple seasons, and they're just playing. They're still just playing. Like Jakub Voracek didn't play all of last season. He gets acquired by the Coyotes. I don't think he's ever going to play again, but he's still an 84 rated player, and then just chilling on their team, putting up points. And I'm sure in next year's roster, he will be like a 70 rated player. But then what they do is that to make teams fit under the cap, they'll just like totally remove that guy's cap hit instead of having the option to actually put players on IR when they're actually like injured for a long amount of time. And it's just, you get situations as well, like Matt Murray is going to be on IR for the whole season. So in what happens when you try to start a GM mode is it will say, not all teams are compliant under the cap. We'll fix that for you. And then what it does is it lowers everyone's cap hit on Toronto so that they fit under the cap, instead of just putting Murray on IR and everyone else's contracts remain the same. So that kind of gives Toronto an advantage, because then when Murray's 1 year left on his deal expires, Toronto has more cap space than they should, because everyone else's contracts have gone down. So that's one more nitpick that has been in the game for a decade that I think they need to sort that out.
That's a good pickup, actually. I didn't even remember that. And like especially the lack of LTIR contributes to the times where you have teams that don't sign RFA players because they
Yes.
still have this in real life, not contributing to the cap, like 80 or something overall player who's making like 9-10 million. And they're still on the cap hit in the game. So the team is like, what do we do? I guess we just don't sign our RFA. So that would be a kind of like a domino effect to hopefully assist in that system. That's a good pickup though. I completely forgot about that. There's
I think
so many little things.
Yeah, I think that they probably don't want to have like career-ending injuries programmed into the simulation where that will like happen to one of your players. But I think I would be okay with it if it happens like only when they're like 35 plus or something like that, because that's something that happens in real hockey. A player can still be elite, but their body just can't do it anymore, like Shea Weber, you know?
Exactly. I think that's probably a good way to kind of balance it so that you don't have like a 28-year-old superstar take a bad check and then you can never use it again, because that sort of randomness would just be really frustrating in gameplay. At least if you had a player who was like above 34, 35, you could be like, okay, I can expect this. Like, I know that this is a possibility. Very similar to how it is in real life. So again, I think like honestly, I feel like we could talk about franchise mode for 2 hours.
Oh, we could do a whole episode on it.
We could. And I think it'd be interesting to talk about, but I think this is a good start to a more interesting, entertaining, and how do you say, and a more option filled franchise mode. I think this is a good start. The only other offline game mode that I can really think of that honestly needs updating is Be a Pro. I do like Be a Pro and the idea of having conversations and things like that, but it's almost really like slapped in, done super lazily, and there isn't that much interesting happening in the game modes. And honestly, I think for a game like hockey where there's 82 games in a season, they really should make like an abridged franchise mode. Like maybe you play a couple games like in a period, and then it projects your point totals from those games into the rest of the games that your player will play, and then it moves you on to the next segment, just to get you through franchises and careers faster. Of course, still allow the option to play every single game if you would want, but allow the option to stretch it out, sequence it like that, so that you can actually get through a player's career much faster instead of devoting hours and weeks of your life to the game to actually achieve that. Of course, the other thing I will say, add the option to get demoted to the AHL. The fact that it's not in the game is ridiculous. The fact also that you cannot play a full season in European leagues or junior leagues is ridiculous. Add that option, because that's the route so many players take. Instead, it's like it's almost like a FIFA like story mode sort of thing where it's like, yeah, you're a new superstar coming into the league, even though you played in the World Cup and you got picked in the 7th round because you scored 1 assist. And it's like, okay, you immediately make the roster because you're just this new superstar coming into the league. Add the option so it's more realistic, so you can actually go to junior leagues, so you can actually go to the AHL if you're not ready. Because at this point, like, I've played enough that I can tear through the regular games in the NHL where I get above point a game easy. At times it's almost easy to get goal per game. At least allow a little bit of buildup so that when you come into the league, it's less like, oh my God, how did this player do this? And instead, this guy was a beast in the OHL or something, a beast in the AHL. This kind of makes sense. It would just, again, make something more realistic and more authentic to play.
Yep. My biggest problem with Be a Pro is that they treat you like you're Connor McDavid no matter what. You can get demoted all the way to the 4th line and playing 5 minutes a night, and the commentary and the interviews will still talk to you like you're a superstar, which is completely ridiculous.
Exactly.
And like you said, we need to be able to play in the AHL. I remember one of my favorite Be a Pros that I ever did way back on like NHL 14. I started on the Canucks AHL team, went like point per game in there, worked my way up, got called up halfway through the season, and then ended up playing with the Sedins, and that was really cool. Apart from, like, instead of just being handed the opportunity straight away, especially when you start off, your player is like 70 overall and then you're already playing on the first line. At least being able to start in the AHL, I was able to work up my players' attributes more before I got called up, and that was a really fun progression system. But now you just don't have that. You're thrown in right away and they're just like, yep, you're McDavid no matter what, and you can't get sent down, you can't play full seasons in juniors, and that's ridiculous too, because way back on the Xbox 360 days, that's how it was, is you would play the whole season in like the CHL, and then eventually they added the option to let you just start at the Memorial Cup. And now they've taken that away and you can only start at the Memorial Cup. Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't. And it's another example where the game kind of went backwards after it got updated to Frostbite, and they do need to make up that ground. And I think adding these features in, which should be super simple, would greatly benefit the Be a Pro experience and make it much more fun and engaging. The only other thing I'll mention about it is it's pretty niche, but I honestly think that in goalie Be a Pros, you need to be able to sim in between shots.
Oh
I
yeah.
understand or shots or sequences where your team is hemmed in or just on the rush shots. Because playing full games as a goalie is really boring. And because of the way the gameplay works in NHL, it's super rare that you get a high amount of shots unless you very meticulously edit the sliders. And even then, it still can make the game kind of goofy to play because you have a bunch of uh, aggressive sliders that make either checking super effective, so players lose the puck off of nothing, or it makes it so that players will take shots from everywhere, even if it's not necessarily realistic. So I think that they should, like, if they do want to enhance the goalie Be a Pro a little bit, add the ability to sim in between sequences or shots, to make the games go by faster and to make it more engaging to play instead of just waiting in the defensive zone for something to happen.
Yep, that's a good point, especially because they made it a point in the gameplay trailer to talk about improved goalie controls for human goalies. So if they are focusing a little bit on that, they should also be focusing on how goalie Be a Pro plays out, because it's been basically unplayable, like, forever. It's never been good, and it could be. It really could be.
Unless you're like fiercely dedicated, it's not really a viable mode. It's fun for a little bit, but it's difficult to really get into, especially with some of the jankiness of the goals. And I'm happy to see that the new goalie controls are hoping to fix some of the jank that comes where you just slide out of the net, even though you just tap to the right stick or something like that. But yeah, I think an overhaul to them, the goalie aspect of the mode would also be greatly appreciated. Overall, just focus on online along with the online game modes. I know they're never not going to focus on HUT because of how big a money maker it is. That includes Chell, because I think the bags are purchasable and stuff like that. So I understand they're never not going to focus on that. But divide the attention a little bit, especially for players like us who really love the offline content. Focus it a little bit. Tailor the experience so we're actually getting something new and enjoyable instead of a rehash of last year's game, which was what NHL pretty much like 17 to 23 was, with very minor changes.
It is true that they will always be focusing on the online game modes because that's what they can monetize, but they are at a point where I think they are losing money because of not focusing on the franchise modes, even though it may be less obvious to them than if they're getting less microtransactions, because I'm at the point where I haven't purchased the game at full price or at all for the last 3 seasons. I've just been waiting until it's on EA Play in April and then playing a few franchise modes. That's all I've done. So they've gotten a few like $5 a month subscriptions out of me, but because they haven't done enough to these offline modes, I'm not buying it. This year I might buy it regardless, just because I think the gameplay updates look cool, but they still need to actually improve the offline modes as well.
Exactly, because I agree with you. I might just buy it for the new gameplay changes, but I again did the exact same thing you did, where I just used EA Play a bunch of times, so they didn't even make the full profit of the game off of me. Probably not even half, to be honest. No. And like, I'm okay with buying the game for the new gameplay changes this year, but if there's like slight gameplay modifications next year, a big focus on HUD and Shell again, without focusing on the offline game modes, I'm going to just fall back into the same thing where I just ignore the game until it gets released on EA Play in the summer and just play it that way because it's so much cheaper. So really targeting these offline game modes is really important to bring back legacy players and to increase the longevity of the game and make me want to purchase it every year. Again, I'd prefer if it wasn't a yearly series. I wish they would take like 2 or 3 year breaks between games, but they're never going to do that. So in the state that they're in, it would be really nice if they just adjusted their focus a little bit, just for players like us.
Exactly. EA, we want to buy your game. Just make it worthwhile for us. And with the gameplay changes that we've talked about, I do think they are making a good step towards that, because the last couple of years, it wasn't only just the offline modes not changing that made me not buy it. It was also the gameplay feeling pretty stale. So we know they're switching up that. We don't know what they're going to do for the offline game modes yet, but we will find out later this summer. And maybe when we do get the reveal on that, we can do another episode talking about what they announce.
Exactly. I think it'd be interesting to go through, especially to do a franchise deep dive, the different changes there, maybe live react to it, see the new, hopefully interesting things that are included.
Hopefully.
But I do have to say the gameplay trailer gets it started off the right foot.
Yes. All right. And as the phone is ringing in Jordan's background, that's where we're going to wrap it up anyway. So that's no problem. I'm just going to leave this in. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching, and have a good one.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching.